This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it to this day. I was on holiday in a city on the other side of the country celebrating my 21st birthday with my best friend. We were having an amazing night out with a few too many drinks and ended up meeting two guys, Andrew and Billy. They seemed like really cool guys and we were into them, so when they asked us back to their hotel room, we said yes. Obviously a silly idea, but we were young and drunk. Things were great on the way back to the hotel room. We were all laughing and having a great time. When we got to the hotel room, there were two other men there as well, Ricky and JD, who were at least 10 to 15 years older than us. They gave us creepy vibes, but we brushed it off. We asked Andrew and Billy who these guys were, and they said that they were colleagues as they were in the city for work and the company paid for their rooms. So Andrew and Billy were in different rooms, but we were all partying in Andrew's room that he shared with Ricky. I got a little too drunk and my friend put me to bed. She said that she was going to Billy's room and asked if I would be okay with Andrew, and I said yes. Keep in mind, my friend didn't have a phone either, so we basically had no way of getting in contact with each other. Another stupid thing I know. So I'd been in the bed for a while with Andrew just talking and chilling when he says, "I just have to pop out, I'll be right back." I assumed he meant just out to the bathroom, not out of the actual hotel room, but he left the hotel room to get something from Billy's hotel room. Anyway, I was just watching TV in bed when the bedroom door opens and I assumed it was Andrew, but my heart sank when it was Ricky, the weird colleague. He walked into the room and sat on the bed. Keep in mind, I'm very naked at this point, trying to cover myself with a blanket. He said, "You do realize that everyone has left you alone in here, right? It's just you all alone. No one is here, and no one can hear you." And continued edging closer and closer to me on the bed. At this point, I was completely speechless and absolutely terrified. I was completely frozen in fear and I had no idea what to do. I tried to say something, but nothing came out. He definitely sensed my fear and for some reason, he just got up and left. A sense of relief flooded me and I felt silly for overreacting. That was until I heard JD, the other random colleague, shouting, "Get the F back in here, what are you doing? This isn't what we discussed. Get back in there and do what you were meant to do. Who cares what that girl thinks? Just get back in there and do what you need to do." I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in because I was so scared, but there was no way out and the only way out of the hotel room was through the front door, and I had to walk past Ricky and JD to get there. I was just so terrified I had a million thoughts rushing through my head, and I had no idea what to do, but I knew that I had to escape. I decided my only option was just to leave the room and be ready to defend myself if things were to go pear-shaped. I threw my clothes on and grabbed my shoes. I opened the door and Ricky and JD were sitting on a couch close to the bedroom door. JD said, "Hey, sexy, where are you going in such a rush? Come on and join us, come here right now." I said no thanks and ran to the front door and ripped it open. When I got out, I was so relieved, but I was still in a random hotel in a random city with no way to contact my friend, but I thought my best option was to go to the lobby and just wait. As I was walking, I heard two men yelling down the hallway, "Where are you? We know you aren't too far away. Come back and join us. You know you want to." It was Ricky and JD. I was absolutely terrified by this point. I began sprinting to the elevator. I could hear them gaining on me. I never knew I could run so fast, but I just continued and didn't look back. I felt like I was running forever until I reached the end of the corridor and my worst nightmare had come true. I missed the turnoff of the elevator. So I had to turn and run back towards where I could hear Ricky and JD still yelling down the hall. I found the elevator and got in. I could hear their voices getting louder and louder, and I didn't want to imagine what would happen if they got into the elevator with me. The door finally closed after what felt like a lifetime. I thought I would go down to the lobby and just wait there because at least there would be people there, so there would be some form of safety. I got to the lobby and realized that there was no one in sight. No one at all, not even behind the desk. I sat there on the couch and didn't know what to do with myself. I was absolutely terrified that Ricky and JD would come to the lobby. Then I heard the elevator ding and the door open. My heart dropped, but it was Andrew. I told him what had happened and he was outraged that his colleagues did that, and he took me to where my best friend was. Everything turned out to be fine, but It truly could have been a lot worse. Phoenix Luna grew up in Tokyo's Tochigi Prefecture. He had a difficult upbringing and at one point was forced to live in a youth institution when his father abandoned his family and his mother could not afford to raise him. After graduating middle school, he gained work in the construction industry, but after a few years quit due to personal issues and ended up homeless on the streets of Tokyo. At just 20 years old, he was penniless and impoverished, but being young and good-looking, he managed to find work as a bar host at a joint called Fusion by Youth. For those that don't know, Tokyo's Kabukicho district is home to a number of bars and clubs known as Hatsuto Karubu. These are places where female customers pay for male company, who are known as bar hosts. Male hosts pour drinks for their clients and will often engage in flirtatious conversations. These conversations are generally lighthearted, and hosts tend to have a variety of entertainment skills, ranging from simple magic tricks to the ability to tell engaging stories. A host's age usually ranges from 18 to 27, and they will often take a stage name, usually taken from a favorite manga, film, or historical figure that describes their character or persona, hence why the young man in question is known here as Phoenix Luna, and not by his birth name, which he has kept a closely guarded secret. Men who become hosts are often those who either cannot find a white-collar job or are enticed by the prospect of high earnings through commission. It was these prospects that attracted Luna to the hosting scene, and the job saved him from a life of homelessness and destitution. But it was through his work as a bar host that Luna met a person that would change his life forever, a 21-year-old woman named Yuka Takaoka. Yuka was employed as the manager of a so-called girls' bar, the female equivalent of the kind of place Luna worked at. She worked long hours and found it very difficult to meet men she was actually attracted to, and found herself frequenting host bars since they revolved around a concept she understood all too well. This was how she met Luna, and upon meeting him in October of 2018, she was instantly smitten. Over the next 7 months, she cultivated a kind of relationship with him and became one of his regular customers. Luna made her feel special, often telling her that he liked her and that he wished to be with her. Hosts are generally forbidden from socializing with their clients outside of working hours, but Luna made an exception for Yuka. They often met at Yuka's 5th-floor apartment in Shinjuku Ward, where they shared food and watched movies, and after a few months of doing so, Yuka asked Luna if he would like to pursue an exclusive relationship with her. Luna replied that he would, but was taken aback when one of her conditions for doing so was that he quit hosting and find a regular job. She was adamant that he would have to stop flirting with other women, whether that be in a professional capacity or otherwise. This was something Luna could not adhere to. He enjoyed his work and considered his fellow hosts as a kind of surrogate family. Reluctantly, he was forced to decline Yuka's offer, but told her they could continue to see each other if that was something she wanted. Yuka was heartbroken. She adored Luna and became increasingly depressed as a result of his rejection. This depression morphed into jealousy and thoughts of taking her own life, and eventually, Yuka hatched a plan for the pair to be together forever. On May the 23rd, 2019, Yuka asked Luna to meet her at her apartment to assist with some cleaning work. They agreed to meet at around noon, but due to work commitments, Luna was delayed by around 3 hours. By the time he arrived, he was exhausted and told Yuka that he would like to take a nap before they commenced the cleaning work. Luna took a quick bath and then climbed into bed with Yuka, where he fell asleep in her arms. He awoke a short time later with an intense pain in his stomach. At first, Luna thought he was suffering from stomach cramps after eating bad food, but when he looked down, he saw the bed sheets were soaked with blood. That's when he saw a large kitchen knife buried into his gut, turning to see Yuka standing over him, her eyes wide with feverish anger. Coursing with adrenaline, Luna leapt from the bed and ran from the apartment to escape his obsessive attacker and to seek medical help. But Yuka gave chase. Luna managed to fight her off as they reached the building's elevator, but had lost so much blood by the time he reached the lobby that he collapsed to the floor and passed out. But before he lost consciousness, Luna saw Yuka kneeling over his body. "Please don't kill me," he begged. "I like you." Yuka smiled, and the world went black. Police soon received a call that a man had been stabbed in an apartment complex in Shinjuku. They arrived shortly afterward to find the unconscious Luna with Yuka sitting by his body, covered in his blood and smoking a cigarette. A photograph was taken of this scene which quickly circulated online, a photograph that is still remarkably easy to obtain via Google image searches. Yuka was quickly arrested, putting up no resistance, and showed absolutely no remorse for her actions. In fact, there is another photograph of Yuka that was taken while she was sitting in the back of the police car after she'd been arrested. A huge, excited smile is etched across her face, which is extremely disturbing given that she had recently almost disemboweled someone she claimed to love so much. When police questioned her motives for the crime, Yuka told them, "Since I loved him so much, I just couldn't help it. I was sad and seeking to die and thought how I would like to go about it," she said. "I thought I would kill him because I thought that was how I could be with him. I thought that expressions such as 'I like you' and 'I'd like to be with you' would become a reality if we both die. I did not want to go anywhere, so I sat down at the outside staircase. I didn't call emergency services because I intended to end my own life after watching him die from the stabbing." In the aftermath of the stabbing, social media users all over the world fixated over her behavior, especially those with an interest in the Japanese concept of yandere, a name used to describe obsessive, jealous female lovers. Those with an interest in the phenomenon shared Yuka's Instagram account, one where she posted images of her dressed as various anime characters, which attracted all kinds of unsavory male attention from those who idolized her good looks and painfully overlooked her murderous psychopathology. Some even said she was too beautiful to be an attempted murder suspect. Luna had lost so much blood in the incident that it took him 5 whole days to regain consciousness in a nearby hospital. Doctors have him a mere 1 in 5 chance at recovery when he had first arrived, but somehow he had beaten the odds and pulled through after a series of surgeries to repair the catastrophic damage done to his internal organs. At first, I had no voice, so speaking was not possible, and I was bedridden, so I couldn't walk alone for a while, Luna said in a statement to journalists. I also couldn't eat after the incident, and I got quite thin. When I thought back to when I was stabbed and considered what I'd do in the future, I was unable to sleep due to anxiety and fear, and for that I received counseling. Yet bizarrely, despite his near-death experience at the hands of Yuka, Luna stated that he did not hold any ill feeling toward her. "I do not hold a grudge. I think there's a reason for her to stab me. It was also thanks to her that I was able to achieve the sales that I did in less than a year since I'd become a host." The incident also had one unexpected result. After Luna arrived at the hospital, police sought to locate one of his blood relatives. "I met my older brother and older sister for the first time in 5 years," he said. "I'll be very happy to stay in touch with them in the future. I think we can agree that the result is a heartwarming, wholesome end to a frankly terrifying ordeal, and that Luna had showed an extraordinary amount of bravery to return to his job as a bar host. But surely, it is only a matter of time before another girl develops an obsession with him, and we can only hope that it doesn't end in the same terrifying, bloody way." This story happened when I was 15. It's been almost an entire decade now, but I still think about it quite a lot. This is our situation. My brothers and I live with my mom. I'm the oldest of 3, and my mom generally leaned on me to get things done. This naturally turned me into an adult from a very early age. Even to this day, my mom talks about feeling guilty for having to thrust adulthood on me so early on. She thinks that I didn't have a childhood, and maybe she's right. As you might imagine, my dad wasn't really in the picture. He was an abusive drunk, and when I say abusive, I mean seriously abusive. Up until the time I was 10, he lived with us, and whenever he would get drunk, he would beat the life out of us. It was always terrifying. The only saving grace was the fact that he wasn't always drunk or had alcohol in the house. In fact, there were sometimes, months at a time, when he would go without drinking, and he was an otherwise pretty decent person. For all that was wrong with my dad, he would have probably been close to an ideal human being if he had not been for his rampant alcoholism and the demon inside of him that came out when he got drunk. The incident that got my mom to finally divorce him was horrendous. I had been in my room playing video games or something, and he was in the living room. My mom just got home from getting the groceries. He accused her of having an affair at the time, and of course, this wasn't true, but he didn't believe it. He kept screaming at her that she was lying. It escalated to the point that he pinned her down on the floor and said that he saw her nose growing, and then grabbed a screwdriver and cut into my mom's nose with it. There's still a scar from that day. Well, that all went down when I was about 10, so this is about 5 years later. My mom was bringing my 2 younger brothers on some kind of Boy Scout trip. They were both in the Boy Scouts and always felt left out because all the other kids had a dad. My mom's guilt drove her to volunteer and help out whenever she could, so she went with my 2 brothers for this weekend camping trip with the Boy Scouts. She really wanted me to go with them because she felt uncomfortable having me alone in the house. I insisted that I was mature enough to do it, and honestly, I didn't even have friends that I could party with if I wanted to. She eventually gave in and let me have my way. I remember being in my bedroom playing with my PlayStation. It was a pretty typical Saturday afternoon, but then I heard a car pull up. I didn't know who it was at first, and I immediately got really panicked that I was going to have to call the cops. My bedroom window doesn't have a really good view at the driveway, so it took me a second, but after studying the part of the car that I could see, I recognized that it was my father's car. I was immediately mortified. I was on bad terms with him, and my mom had a really serious restraining order put on him after they had separated. I got really nervous, and I was not sure what I should even do. He didn't come into the house for a few minutes, and I immediately started wondering what he was up to. I did the only thing that I could think of and cracked my window so I could hear what was going on outside. I thought that if I could hear what he was doing, I would have a better idea. I immediately recognized that he was crying. His whimpering sound was really intense. I hadn't heard from him in years, and my mom said that we would never see him again. But here he was, crying in our driveway. He paced around for a few minutes before finally standing still. I could hear his crying getting louder. Then he screamed. All I heard was a gunshot. The second I heard the gunshot, I immediately knew what had happened. I ran outside. I looked down at my father's lifeless body on the driveway cement. Blood everywhere. As traumatic as it may have been, I didn't cry. I didn't act emotional or anything. I just called the police. They got there a few minutes later and took me into custody. They wanted to keep me safe and secure until they could contact my mom. The rest of the story played out exactly as you would imagine. My mom apologized profusely. I had to answer some questions to the police. Nothing out of the ordinary. I don't really know what to make of the situation. I don't have much sympathy for the guy, and part of me is kind of happy that he did it. But looking back, I just kind of wish that he had done it where I wouldn't have had to have witnessed it. The entire experience made me never want to go stay home by myself ever again. It's been a long time since this whole thing had gone down, and even now, if I have to stay home by myself, I will make an effort to leave the house or to invite a friend over. I won't stay there alone. A couple of years have passed since this entire situation, and I can't help but to think that it was all for the better. My dad was a seriously destructive human being, and I know this might sound terrible, but I just wish that he had done it sooner. For those out there that haven't lived with a toxic and negative parental figure, consider yourself extremely lucky. The tribulations that I had to endure at the hands of my father fostered a lot of rage inside of me. My mom is really good friends with one of the wealthiest people in our town. They have a daughter, my age. I don't have a crush on her or anything, but my mom has pushed me to ask her out before. Never did. Here's the weird thing about the situation, though. My mom and this friend, along with her daughter, all kind of act like their friend. Like a bunch of high school girls getting together to gossip. My mom works in a beauty salon, so I guess I understand why she likes to act that way, but it's still pretty weird nonetheless. There was one specific occasion when this woman and her daughter were going to visit New York City. They decided to invite my mom for some reason. I don't understand why. I guess they really were better friends than I had previously believed. But my mom decided to say yes. So it was just me and my dad at the house, but here was the thing. They didn't have a dad at home. Their house was going to be completely unsupervised for the entire weekend. I was in my early 20s at the time, so I guess they thought it would be a good idea to ask if I would watch the house for them, which I agreed to do. I didn't get paid or anything, but they said I was allowed to eat as much food as I wanted, and considering that they were rich, I thought, why not? This also gave me an opportunity to write some short stories. I always loved writing, and I published some of my stuff online sometimes. I think it was that Friday night when I was watching their house. They told me that they had 2 cats, but they were really scared of strangers, and I was probably not going to see either one of them the entire night. Didn't bother me. I just had to make sure that they had food and water, which they did. I was chilling at the kitchen table, pounding the keys on my laptop on my latest story when, all of a sudden, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked up from my computer to notice the ugliest cat I've ever seen in my life. Just imagine a hairless cat, but also morbidly obese and cross-eyed. It was honestly the strangest thing I've ever seen. Any one of those traits individually would have made a cat kind of cute, but seeing all of them thrown together in one pitiful excuse for a pet almost made me want to bust a gut laughing. I felt kind of bad for laughing so hard at this girl's cat, but it's not like I hurt it or anything. That had been a good break from writing, but then I got back into it. I remember being in the middle of writing a really interesting scene. This ghost was abducting the protagonist of the story. It's kind of a psychological thriller with a little bit of paranormal thrown in there. It's very spiritual and weird. I'm kind of a weird person. But that scene still sticks with me because as I'm writing it, I noticed something outside. There was a man in a hooded sweatshirt walking around. I sat at the kitchen table, stunned. I didn't know what to do. I felt the adrenaline burst through my veins. Fight or flight. Well, I figured that my car was outside, so running wasn't going to do me much good. And after a minute of rationalizing the situation, I had no proof that this person was out to do anything bad. For all I knew, this could have been a jogger. I got up close to one of the windows to watch this man. He seemed to be sneaking around. He wasn't coming toward the house I was in, so I figured that I was at least safe for the moment. But then I noticed him looking into the window of the house across the street. I can only assume that he was checking houses to see if people were home or not. Must have been an actual burglar. Just show up in the wealthy neighborhood and see who wasn't home. I don't know why he would do it at night, though. Looks as suspicious as he did. We live in a gun state, after all. And after a few minutes went by, and I could tell that there were people at home at the house he was checking out. By the time he realized, I noticed him do a 180. He was walking in my direction now. I was about to be face to face with this man. I saw him walking across the street and I immediately started to panic. I called the police as fast as I could and told them the situation, but they said it would be about 20 minutes before anyone could be here. I ran up to the attic to hide. I locked the door behind me. In retrospect, this was my biggest mistake. I should have turned on a bunch of lights and made it obvious that someone was here. I'm good at thinking, just not in the moment. The house must have looked uninhabited by the time I had gotten up to the attic. This made the house the perfect place to burglarize and steal everything. I was in the attic for about 10 minutes when I heard a window breaking downstairs. He was in the house. My heartbeat was inside of my forehead. He walked around the house for a few minutes. Thud. Thud. I heard the humongous boots marching across the wooden floors. He explored the house for a good while. I was really beginning to wonder where the police were. Typical. I heard him get close to the attic entrance, and that was the moment that pushed me over the edge. I started screaming at the top of my lungs that I had a gun. I told him that I was going to shoot his head off if he didn't leave the house immediately. And to my absolute shock, he ran away. I watched him run down the street as I looked on through the window. It appeared that this guy was even more scared for his life than I was. The police eventually got there, and I told them the entire story from beginning to end. They said that a couple of people had been reporting this guy in nearby neighborhoods, so this wasn't the first night he's been out doing this. The police explained that this guy hadn't been violent on any of the occasions they'd been called. They said it was about the 7th time this month that they have responded to a similar incident in a wealthy neighborhood. I guess he's going around looking for an easy way to make money. He hasn't been face to face with any of the homeowners yet, so Maybe he isn't a violent criminal, just a criminal in general. I found the entire experience really interesting yet mortifying. Living through it was probably the most scared I've ever been. My mom, her friend, and their daughter didn't even come back early from their trip after it happened. I thought that was a lame move, but what do I know? For revenge, I ate every single pizza roll they had in the freezer, and if you're wondering, there were 3 bags of 90 pizza rolls. I ate over 270 pizza rolls that weekend, and I have no regrets. I sorely needed them after that borderline traumatic experience with the burglar. It's every kid's dream to go to Disney World, right? It's a dream that a lot of American kids never get to have come true, let alone British kids. So I always felt extremely fortunate and privileged that my parents were not only financially capable of taking our family over to Florida for a couple weeks, but also that they actually put the time aside to do something like that. In all likelihood, they probably didn't want to. I mean, no offense to anyone that does, but what kind of actual grown-up wants to spend all that time queuing up for rides in the baking hot sun after paying for overpriced churros and chocolate sauce? That's not even touching on the pure scam that is Disney dollars. But still, my parents relented to mine and my sister's pleas to take us all the way across the Atlantic to arguably the craziest state in the Union, Florida. This happened a long time ago, back in 1998, so excuse me if I misremember any details about the park itself. But I remember the year pretty clearly because of the game StarCraft had just come out, and I was fortunate enough to pick up a copy in the US before it was even commercially available in the UK. To 10-year-old me, Florida was like the land of the lost or something. I mean, it had actual dinosaurs, i.e. Alligator farms, where you could feed the big old beasts with hunks of meat, something I was way too scared to do myself, but was only too happy to watch my dad do before he scampered away down the wooden walkway like he was regressing into a childlike state out of pure primal fear. It was the land of Tropicana, where the food portions dwarfed those in the UK, and the grass and trees were so different and fantastical that I might as well have landed on a paradise alien world. It was the Sunshine State in name and in nature, and of course, it was the home of the most magical place in the entire universe, Disney World. But it was during our third and final day trip to Disney World that something happened that I didn't properly understand until I was a great deal older. The truth of which my parents tried their best to shield me and my little sister from for as long as they could, and this is how it happened. So, I remember we were in the Animal Kingdom part of the park. I was always really interested in natural history when I was growing up, so I was particularly excited to see this part of Disney World, and was incredibly happy and excited to be there. I had to wait 3 whole days at Disney before we finally got to see that particular part of it, and every other kid there seemed to be just as happy as I was, all except one. On the shuttle bus out at the park, I remember seeing this one little girl with her dad, who looked uncharacteristically miserable for a kid who actually had the good fortune to be visiting Disney World. But I mean, there's always one moody kid out of the bunch, isn't there? One who never seems to have any fun no matter what's happening. So honestly, as confused as I was about it, I forgot about it pretty quickly as my own excitement at seeing all the animals quickly overwhelmed me. My favorite Disney film was The Lion King, so go figure, I was buzzed. But throughout the day, whether we were on the rides or on the little safari tour thing, or eating at one of the cafes there, I'd see this little girl and her dad, and she looked consistently exhausted and unhappy. I found myself starting to point where my mom and dad were like, "Stop staring at other kids, it's rude." So, I did, because I knew they were right. Of course it was rude to stare, and besides that, the little girl seemed awfully upset, and surely me just staring at her would only make it worse. So a little while later, I remember walking along drinking one of those ginormous American zillion-ounce sodas or whatever, happy as Larry, when I see the little girl and her dad in front of us. I'm not going to pretend to be all like, I knew something was wrong. I sensed it, 'cause I didn't. Not at all. But one thing struck me as kinda odd about the whole thing. By the time I was 10, I hated holding my mom or dad's hand. It was what babies did, I'd say, and like me, this little girl didn't seem all that keen on holding her dad's hand, and at one point even tried to shake it loose. But he kept holding on to her, and at one point started properly gripping her wrist and telling her to behave. I obviously found this kind of distressing, and I looked up at my dad as if to be like, "Are you seeing this?" half expecting to be told to stop staring again. Both my parents looked kind of concerned about what was going on, but I didn't dare say anything. I was old enough to know that some kids misbehave sometimes, and people around had that kind of cringy, pretend it's not happening kind of feeling about them. Only then, instead of just calming down, the little girl just bursts into tears and starts wailing, "I want my mommy, I want my mommy," while the guy is trying his best to calm her down, all like, "We'll get you to mommy soon, sweetie," and all this other stuff that he was saying. What happened next is kind of a blur in my memory. There was just a lot of commotion, but this is how my dad tells the story from his perspective. Apparently, while the little girl is waiting, my dad hears her blatantly say, "I want Daddy, where's Daddy?" And the way he tells it, the mood in the crowd around us like visibly shifts as it suddenly becomes obvious that this guy that had been taking her around the park was not her father. There's slight hesitation, though. No one actually acts on the revelation for the first few minutes or so, and for good reason. The guy might have been her uncle, a family friend, a legal guardian, or carer. There was nothing evidently insidious about it. That is until the guy snaps at her in a way that is distinctly unparental. Apparently some other American dad was all like, "Is there a problem, buddy?" or something, and the guy is quick to calm the situation down by telling them that, no, there's no problem, the little girl's just having a temper tantrum. Then someone asks if the guy is actually the girl's dad, to which he apparently replies yes, before trying again to reassure the gathering crowd that everything was okay and that she was just having a tantrum. Now the next part I remember pretty clearly, because the girl shouted something before the man with her clamps her hand over her mouth so hard it sounded like a slap. My mom starts pulling me and my sister away from the scene since it was starting to turn ugly, like really ugly, really fast. According to my dad's version of it, what the girl had screamed before the guy tried to shut her up is that he wasn't her dad at all. Not only that, but he had took her. And that's when it starts getting confusing for me again, because all kinds of people started moving forward and blocking my view, and all this shouting and moving kicks off. But I do remember seeing this tubby woman shoving her way through the crowd of people, with that same little girl in her arms, who by that point was just sobbing uncontrollably. After that, I remember seeing the crowd that had formed around the guy begin to sway and shift. There were shouts and screams. I mean, like the kind of screams that were so intense and frightening that they made me shake and shiver with fear, and had my little sister bursting into tears. By the time park security showed up, who 10-year-old me just assumed were the police, the crowd began to disperse, and I distinctly remember seeing the man who had apparently taken the little girl from God knows where, pinned to the ground with someone on top of him. That's about the only part that I can remember crystal clear to this day. A lot of my memory has been filled in with my mom and dad's retelling of the event, but the image of that guy's rage, how it twisted up in his features, is still burned into my mind. And it's been made all the more sinister by the fact that I now know what he was so angry about. He'd taken that girl and kept her pliant because he'd promised her a trip around Disneyland. She was probably so keen to go that she just hadn't fought back, and God knows what he was intending to do with her afterward. But that chance had been taken away from him by a bunch of do-gooders. At least, that's the way I imagine he thought of it. Playing this sick long game of lulling his prey into a false sense of security before he finally got his way with her. Not that I realized any of that at the time. To 10-year-old me, it was all just this big mess of confusion and fear. But knowing that whatever was going on was just very, very wrong. We have no idea what happened to the man or the little girl after that. No one spoke of it again for the rest of the holiday, and I'm pretty sure it was almost 5 or 6 years before one of them brought it up with me and explained exactly what the situation was. As far as I knew, all I'd seen was a dad mistreating his daughter who had then been arrested for it. And even to this day it screws in my head that one of the worst things I'd ever witnessed happened in what was billed as the happiest place on earth, and how if things had gone just a little differently, that girl could have been a corpse, or worse, a few days later, and none of us would be any the wiser. Thank God she spoke up when she did. Thank God that there were people there that reacted the way they did, because I really don't want to think about the alternative.